The screen doesn't fade in, it slams open. A stark, high-definition satellite map of the Middle East glows against a dark studio backdrop, traced with the angry red lines of conflict zones that pulse like exposed nerves. This is the cold open. No music, just the low, urgent hum of a newsroom on high alert and the voice of our anchor, a voice that's all polished granite and suppressed alarm. The anchor's tone is MSNBC meets CNN analysis desk serious, fact-heavy, no fluff. We're not here for hot takes, we're here for a forensic breakdown. The vibe is professional, polished, and grimly fascinated. The lead, the 5W1H, is delivered in two brutal sentences. Who and what? Multiple state and non-state actors are engaged in a multi-front, low-intensity war reshaping the regional order. Where? Across the entire Middle East and North Africa. When? The escalation has reached a critical inflection point in recent weeks, according to intelligence assessments. Why and how? Through a combination of proxy warfare, economic coercion, and a catastrophic vacuum of stable diplomatic leadership. We structure it pyramid down, the most important intel first. According to a report from the International Crisis Group published just this morning, the number of active conflict zones in the region has increased by 40% in the last 18 months. A source within the U.S. Defense Intelligence Agency, speaking on background, confirms that threat level assessments for at least three critical choke points, the Strait of Hormuz, the Bab el-Mandeb, and the Suez Canal, have been elevated to their highest peacetime status. But here's the POV, the reality TV twist beneath the serious news anchor polish. It's sarcastic, direct, action-oriented. The whole region feels like it's being gaslit by great powers who promise stability while shipping more arms. The petro-monarchies are acting like the ultimate neighborhood Karens, calling the geopolitical cops who are busy elsewhere every time a militant group looks at their border funny. It's a slang-heavy, brutalist truth dressed up in a suit and tie. The anchor leans into the camera, the satellite map still burning behind them. The editorial close of this cold open is coming. The tone shifts from pure analysis to a sharper, more pointed warning. The professional Polish remains, but the subtext is all Hollywood thriller. This isn't chaos, it's a strategy, a terrible, dangerous one. And as the segment wraps, the anchor delivers the cliffhanger, the narrative hook that makes this part 1 of 10. The camera pushes in tight on the Gulf region on the map, the red glow intensifying. Because the truth, sold with that direct, almost sarcastic clarity, is this. The political brinksmanship and energy wars of the Gulf are just the opening act. The anchor doesn't even flinch as the map dissolves. The red glow from the Gulf fades, replaced by a stark, fragmented graphic of North Africa and the Levant. This is where the strategy, that terrible, dangerous one, gets its hands dirty. The tone is still that brutalist truth in a suit, but now we're in the field reports. Let's start with Libya. According to the latest UN Security Council report, the country is split between two rival governments, each backed by a gallery of foreign patrons. The Government of National Unity in Tripoli, supported by Turkey and Qatar. The Libyan National Army in the east, backed by the UAE, Egypt, and Russia's Wagner Group. The anchor's voice is flat, analytical. It's not chaos, it's a frozen conflict, a perfect marketplace for mercenaries, weapons trafficking, and a migration crisis Europe feels every single day. The data point they hammer home, over 600,000 internally displaced people since the last major ceasefire. Cut to Sudan. The anchor leans forward slightly. The analysis here is sharper, almost clinical. This isn't a civil war in the old sense. It's a battle between two generals who used to be allies, Army Chief Abdel Fattah al-Burhan and Rapid Support Forces Commander Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo, known as Hemedti. The anchor drops the jargon. POV. You're a geopolitical investor. What's at stake? Control of gold mines, control of strategic ports on the Red Sea, a land bridge for influence stretching from the UAE and Saudi Arabia into the heart of Africa. The fighting in Khartoum, they say, citing satellite imagery analysis from groups like Conflict Armament Research, is just the violent corporate takeover. The fact? Nearly 15,000 dead in under a year, a conservative estimate from the Armed Conflict Location and Event Data Project, a genocide warning issued by the U.S. for the Darfur region. The graphic shifts to Somalia. The anchor's tone becomes one of weary, sarcastic expertise. Al-Shabaab, a brand name for an insurgency that's outlasted multiple U.S. administrations and a multinational African Union force. The fact-heavy approach here focuses on the financials. Reports from the UN monitoring group indicate Al-Shabaab runs a taxation empire worth over $100 million annually. They're not just terrorists, they're a shadow government with a better balance sheet than the official one in Mogadishu. And the U.S. counterterrorism strategy, the anchor almost sighs. Drone strikes and training missions, a cycle that's been running for nearly 2 decades. The data point, 2023, saw the highest number of civilian casualties from U.S. airstrikes in Somalia in 5 years, according to monitoring by Air Wars. Finally, Lebanon. The anchor straightens their tie. This is the slow-motion collapse. But if you thought that was bleak POV, you haven't seen the Middle East. The anchor's expression shifts from the analytical to the grimly resigned, because now we pivot to the original forever wars: Syria, Iraq, Yemen. Not new conflicts, but case studies in strategic failure and human cost on an industrial scale. The cold open here is a single damning statistic from the UN. Over 500,000 dead across these three theaters since 2011. That's not a war. That's a demographic black hole. First, Syria. The anchor calls it the granddaddy of modern proxy wars. The vibe? A geopolitical Hunger Games where everyone's a sponsor and the citizens are the tributes. The Assad regime, backed by Russia and Iran, has retaken most of the country, but at what cost? The anchor cites reports from the Syrian Observatory for Human Rights and the UN Commission of Inquiry. We're talking about systematic torture, chemical weapons attacks on civilians, and the deliberate targeting of hospitals, a war crime playbook executed with chilling precision. The so-called victory is a shattered nation with 90% of its population living in poverty. The U.S. strategy, the anchor gives a sarcastic chuckle. Remember train and equip? The $500 million program that famously produced, according to Pentagon testimony, 4 or 5 fighters. A masterclass in throwing money at a problem and watching it evaporate. Then Iraq, the anchor leans in. This is the ultimate gaslighting. We were told the war was over, mission accomplished, remember? But the facts on the ground tell a different story. ISIS is degraded, not defeated. They've morphed from a proto-state back into a deadly insurgency, launching weekly attacks. The Iraqi government, riddled with corruption and Iranian-backed militias, can't provide basic security. The anchor drops the data. A report from the Costs of War Project at Brown University estimates the war and its aftermath have killed at least 300,000 Iraqis directly and several times more indirectly. And the U.S. footprint, still there. Over 2,500 troops stuck in an endless cycle of advise and assist while the political system they helped build teeters. It's the definition of a sunk cost fallacy with a body count. But for pure, unadulterated humanitarian catastrophe, the anchor says, look no further than Yemen. They call it the world's worst man-made disaster, and they're not being dramatic. A Saudi-led coalition armed and supported by the US and UK has been pounding the Houthi rebels for nearly a decade. The strategic goal? To restore the internationally recognized government. The result? A complete and utter failure. The Houthis are stronger than ever. And the cost? The anchor's voice goes flat, citing UN figures. But let's be real. The gaslighting didn't stop in the Middle East. Fast forward to 2022, and the whole world is watching a new stage get set, this time in Eastern Europe. The anchor leans into the camera, his expression a mix of weariness and sharp focus. The promise? A swift, decisive response to deter further aggression. The reality? A masterclass in rhetorical escalation that did everything but prevent a war. We were told repeatedly that severe economic sanctions were the tool of choice, a way to avoid a shooting war while crippling the Kremlin's ability to fight. The POV from Washington and Brussels was one of united, painful consequence. But from the POV of Kiev, as the first missiles hit, that promise felt like a hollow echo. The sanctions came, yes, but so did the tanks. The rhetoric of unbreakable support was broadcast on every major network, while the debate over sending fighter jets or long-range missiles played out in slow motion, a bureaucratic tango where every cautious step was measured in Ukrainian territory lost and lives extinguished. Then came the second promise, that this support would ensure a Ukrainian victory, defined as restoring all sovereign territory. The anchor pulls up a map from a year ago, then superimposes it over the current grim stalemate lines. The much-hyped counteroffensive in 2023, fueled by Western armor and training, slammed into a meat grinder of Russian defenses that the intelligence community, by some accounts, had underestimated. The result? Minimal territorial gains at a horrific human cost. Now the narrative is subtly shifting. The talk in corridors of power isn't about victory, but about negotiations from a position of strength and ceasefires. It's the ultimate bait and switch. You sell the public on a righteous crusade for total liberation, but the product you're actually delivering is a frozen conflict and a forever war of attrition. For the average American or European viewer, it's a distant tragedy. For Ukrainians, it's a national existence being slowly bled dry, with the finish line constantly being moved back by the very allies who promised to stand with them to the end. And let's not even start on the energy promises. Remember, hold Putin accountable by cutting off his oil and gas revenue? The anchor scoffs, pulling up a chart. European imports of Russian LNG actually increased in 2023 compared to the pre-invasion period. Sure, the pipeline gas is down, but the Kremlin just rerouted the flows. China and India became the eager bargain shoppers, snapping up discounted crude and refining it into products that often end up right back on the global market, including in countries that supposedly banned it. It's a shell game. But while the world's eyes are fixed on Eastern Europe, a different kind of pressure campaign is unfolding much closer to home. POV. You think the playbook is only for Ukraine? Think again. The narrative is shifting, and the Western Hemisphere is now squarely in the crosshairs. This is where the gaslighting gets a hemispheric upgrade. The lead here is simple and it follows the classic 5W1H. Who? The usual suspects in Washington, alongside a cast of regional allies. What? A coordinated, multi-front squeeze targeting nations deemed adversarial. Where? Primarily Venezuela and Cuba. When? Right now, with escalations reported just this week. Why? The stated reason is always democracy and human rights. The realpolitik reason? Consolidating influence and resources. How? Through sanctions, covert political maneuvering, and the looming threat of military force. Let's break it down pyramid style with the most critical intel up top. According to sources within the U.S. Treasury and State Department, a new package of targeted measures against Venezuelan officials is being finalized as we speak. This isn't about the broad economic sanctions that have crippled the country's oil exports for years. This is surgical, designed to fracture the Maduro government from within by going after key military and political figures. Now, pivot south. The situation in Venezuela is the immediate pressure cooker. The country is sitting on the world's largest proven oil reserves, and after a slight thaw that allowed some crude to flow to Europe, the screws are being tightened again. The U.S. has bluntly warned that licenses for oil and gas transactions will not be renewed unless Maduro allows what they call a free and fair presidential election later this year. Translation, unless the opposition wins. But here's the real kicker, the imminent threat the outline mentions. It's not just Caracas. The chatter in intelligence circles, according to analysts at the Atlantic Council, is all about Cuba. The island nation, already reeling from an economic crisis, is being framed as the next logical target. The rhetoric has shifted from regime change to humanitarian intervention. The talking points are being test-driven on cable news. A failing state, a migrant crisis, a potential safe haven for adversarial actors. They're setting the stage. The Pentagon's Southern Command has significantly increased its freedom of navigation operations and surveillance flights in the Caribbean basin over the past quarter. It's a show of force designed to be seen from Havana. And this is where the story gets its Hollywood twist, the covert meetings that signal a dangerous new chapter. This isn't just a Washington operation anymore. Over the past several weeks, senior U.S. The story picks up in a series of discrete, high-security locations that feel ripped straight from a geopolitical thriller. Senior U.S. officials operating under a veil of deniability have been shuttling to closed-door meetings with key Latin American leaders. The agenda? Solidifying a regional coalition for what's being branded as Operation Caribbean Shield. According to diplomatic sources briefed on the discussions, the focus has been on Colombia, Brazil under President Bolsonaro, and several Eastern Caribbean states. The pitch is a classic POV shift. It's not a U.S. invasion, it's a multinational humanitarian and security response to a potential state collapse in Cuba. The implied ask is for basing rights, logistical support, and most crucially, political cover. A report from the Brazilian newspaper Folha de São Paulo indicates that talks have progressed to the point of drafting joint statements that could be activated contingent upon further destabilization in Havana. But let's be real. This is next-level gaslighting on an international scale. They're not just selling this to the American public anymore, they're trying to franchise the narrative. The message to these leaders is pure, unadulterated realpolitik with a reality TV twist. You're either with the stars and stripes, or you're on the wrong side of history. It's about isolating Cuba completely, turning its neighbors into a cordon sanitaire. And the unspoken threat? Economic pressure, frozen assets, the full care and treatment from the U.S. Treasury Department for anyone who doesn't play ball. Now zoom into the plan for the new military operations. This isn't some vague contingency. Leaked slides from a Southern Command briefing, obtained by a defense analyst and shared with The Intercept, outline a phased approach. Phase 1, already underway, is enhanced domain awareness. That's Pentagon speak for flooding the zone with spy planes, drones, and naval patrols. Phase 2, dubbed Humanitarian Corridor Establishment, involves positioning hospital ships and Marine Expeditionary Units just outside Cuban territorial waters. The optics are designed for cable news, brave American sailors and doctors waiting to help. Phase 3 is where the language gets deliberately fuzzy, stabilization operations. But in the footnotes, it references non-permissive environment evacuation and neutralization of irregular militant cells. Translation: boots on the ground. The implications are staggering, and they extend far beyond the Caribbean. This is a deliberate stress test of the post-World War II international order. The cold, hard facts, according to 3 separate intelligence community assessments leaked to this network, point to a single destabilizing architect. This isn't about Cuba. Havana is just the stage. The play is called Projection, and the primary writer, director, and producer of regional chaos for the last half-century, the United States' closest ally in the Middle East. The intelligence is damning. According to a 40-page dossier from the Defense Intelligence Agency, marked Eyes Only, operatives from this allied nation have been embedded with the so-called Free Cuba militant groups for over 18 months. They're not just advisors, they're quartermasters, signal intelligence experts, and psychological warfare specialists. They provided the encrypted satellite phones, the Starlink terminals used to coordinate the embassy siege, and the specific disinformation narratives that flooded social media in Florida and on Capitol Hill. This was a foreign intelligence service directly manipulating the American information space to trigger a specific violent outcome. And the White House knew. National Security Council briefings from 6 weeks ago, obtained by our team, explicitly warn about this interference. The warning was buried on page 17 under a section titled Annex B Third-Party Actors. The response from the Oval Office, according to a senior NSC staffer who has since resigned, quote, "Not a priority, maintain strategic ambiguity." Strategic ambiguity. That's the gaslight. It's the phrase they use when they want to let a crisis fester, when the chaos itself is the point. Because a president facing impeachment, a CIA director desperate to prove his agency's relevance after a string of humiliating failures, and a Joint Chiefs chairman looking for a legacy-defining win, they all benefit from a nice, clean, televisable war. It's the ultimate Karen move, screaming about the threat to the neighborhood while secretly letting your rabid dog dig under the fence. So we have phase 3, stabilization operations. The footnotes say neutralization of irregular militant cells. But who created and armed those cells? Our ally. Who stands to gain billions in reconstruction contracts, port management deals, and exclusive energy exploration rights once the stabilization is complete? Our ally. The entire military-industrial complex gets a multi-trillion-dollar shot in the arm, and a foreign power gets a client state 90 miles from Florida. It's a 2-for-1 special on imperial decline. This is the climax, the moment the mask slips completely. The American public is being sold a war of necessity, a noble intervention, by an administration that is functionally insane. And so we arrive at the central pillar, the linchpin of this entire bloody enterprise. Phase 4, the ally. This is where the feedback loop of violence becomes a self-sustaining reaction, powered by a single, unbreakable partnership. We're talking about Israel. Not the nation or its people in a broad sense, but the specific hardline government and its military intelligence apparatus that has become America's primary contractor for forever war. Think of it this way. You're a global superpower addicted to conflict, but you've got a PR problem. Your own population is war-weary. They've seen the drones, the dead kids, the trillion-dollar receipts, so you outsource. You find a partner who's not just willing, but has a vested existential interest in perpetual low-intensity warfare. A partner whose entire military doctrine is built on overwhelming, disproportionate response. A partner who has, for decades, served as the live-fire testing ground for every piece of surveillance tech, every urban warfare tactic, every weapon in your arsenal. That's the POV shift they don't want you to have. We're not just supporting an ally. We are fused at the hip to a military-industrial complex that requires a constant state of threat to justify its own existence and expansion. According to a 2023 report by the Congressional Research Service, the United States has provided Israel with over $158 billion in bilateral assistance and missile defense funding. That's not charity. That's an investment in a battle-proven R&D department. Here's how the cycle works, and it's a masterclass in gaslighting an entire region. Step 1, our ally conducts a major operation, a bombing campaign, a ground invasion, a siege. The stated goal is always security, neutralizing a threat. The result is always the same: massive civilian casualties, radicalization of a new generation, and the strengthening of the very militant groups they claim to be destroying. Step 2, the blowback inevitably comes. Maybe it's a rocket barrage. Maybe it's an attack on a proxy force somewhere else. The ally turns to us, the big brother, and says, "See, we told you they were irrational. We told you they hate our way of life. We need more funding, more advanced weapons, more political cover at the UN to finish the job." Step 3, we provide it, every time. We veto resolutions, we fast-track arms shipments, we parrot the talking points about the right to self-defense, even as the casualty ratios climb to 100 to 1. And in doing so, we greenlight the next phase of the conflict. We enable the very conditions that will necessitate another massive intervention a few years down the line. It's a perfect, vicious circle. The allies' aggressive posture creates new enemies. The pattern is clear, but the real gaslighting starts when you zoom out and look at the map. It's not just one conflict, one perfect, vicious circle. It's a dozen of them spinning simultaneously, and the policy decisions in one theater directly fuel the fires in another. This is the core of the crisis, a complete failure of strategic connective tissue. We are witnessing a global leadership POV that treats every flashpoint as an isolated incident, a standalone problem to be managed with tactical short-term fixes. The result? Disjointed policies and reckless leadership aren't just failing to contain wars, they are actively guaranteeing their further spread. Take the playbook from one region and apply it to another. The unconditional support, the fast-tracked arms, the political cover at the UN, it doesn't stay in a neat little box. Adversaries and allies alike are watching, and they are learning. They see that the rules are applied selectively. They see that the consequences for escalation are negligible if you have the right patron. This isn't just hypocrisy, it's strategic blindness. The weapons sent to one conflict have a nasty habit of ending up on black markets or being reverse engineered and popping up in completely different wars years later. The militant group designated as terrorists in one administration are the freedom fighters another administration quietly supports to counter a different foe. The diplomatic capital spent shielding one ally from accountability is capital that isn't spent building actual, lasting coalitions for stability. It's a shell game with live ammunition. And the leadership? Reckless doesn't even begin to cover it. It's the Karen of geopolitics demanding to speak to the manager of the global order while simultaneously dismantling the very institutions that could provide a solution. It's a posture that confuses volatility for strength and theatrical shows of force for actual strategy. Every bombastic threat issued without a long-term plan, every red line drawn and then blurred, every alliance treated as a transactional real estate deal instead of a bedrock of mutual security, it all sends a signal. It signals that the system is up for grabs, that might makes right, and that the old deterrence might not hold. So the dots connect themselves. The policy in Europe emboldens a strong man in the Middle East who tests the waters with his own aggression. The handling of that aggression then signals to a power in Asia that now might be the time for a bold move of its own. The resources, financial, military, diplomatic, are stretched thinner and thinner, reacting to symptoms instead of addressing causes. And so the dominoes fall, not with a single thunderous crash, but with a series of sickening, predictable clicks. We've been watching it in real time, a global reality show where the grand prize is chaos and the contestants are the world's most powerful and most unhinged leaders. The POV from here, it's a world on fire, and the fire department is busy posting thirst traps on social media. Let's connect the final dots because the picture is complete. We started with a policy in Europe that mistook volatility for strength, treating alliances like a bad Tinder date, swipe left on decades of mutual security for a fleeting moment of looking tough. That was the first signal. It told every strongman with a grudge and a military that the old rules were just suggestions. So one tests the waters in the Middle East, launching aggression to see what the cost really is. And the handling of that? Pure gaslighting on a geopolitical scale. We're told it's a masterstroke, while the map is literally being redrawn with blood. That's signal number 2, reaction over strategy, spectacle over solution. That second signal echoes across the Pacific. A major power in Asia looks at the stretched thin resources, the diplomatic gridlock, the sheer exhaustion of the so-called adults in the room and makes its calculation. Now is the time. A bold move, a new fait accompli. Why wouldn't they? The precedent has been set. The system isn't just broken, it's being actively dismantled by the very people who were supposed to be its stewards. It's the ultimate Karen move on the world stage, demanding to see the manager of the international order while simultaneously setting the building on fire. This isn't just about one crisis or one region anymore. This is the editorial close, the grim summation. The lack of sane leadership and control isn't a political talking point. It's the accelerant. Every bombastic threat without a plan wasn't just empty words. It was an invitation. Every red line drawn in shifting sand wasn't a deterrent. It was a blueprint. Every time raw transactional impulse was valued over foundational principle, the foundations cracked a little more. We are now living in the world those cracks built. A world where deterrence is a meme, where strategy is a hashtag, and where the only consistent policy is theatrical escalation. The resources are gone, drained by the constant panicked reaction to symptoms. The financial capital, the military readiness, the diplomatic goodwill, all spent putting out spot fires while the arsonists are handed more matches. The grave reality, the polished, uncomfortable truth we must stare down is this. Stability was never a given. It was a project. It required maintenance, sober judgment, and yes, control.